So I'm here in Drogheda, Ireland, which is the hometown of my dad's family. And I did a little bit of research on the internet. The Irish census records are not fully complete from the 1800s. They were destroyed. But the 1901 and 1911 census records are still available online. And I decided to do research about my great-grandpa, who would be Richard Doyle Sr.'s dad, who was Robert Doyle, and he was married to Jane Moore. And they lived in the same neighborhood where they eventually married and had my granddad. So behind me are a bunch of row houses, and my husband took a picture in front of the one row house where my granddad, Robert Doyle, great-granddad, was 16 years old in 1901, and he was living with his aunt and uncle, the Hilliard family, and his older cousin. Don't know why he was living there without his parents at 16, but census records show that he was their nephew and he was living in this house, and it's on Magdalen Street. So then I went to go search for Jane Moore, M-O-O-R-E. I found her census records in 1901. She was 13 years old. She was living in a house with 8 people, none of which were her parents. Her oldest brother, William, was about, I think, 24. I'll show the census records when I put the video together. He and his sister, the next oldest, were a painter and the sister worked as a weaver in one of the mills here. They were raising their 6 younger siblings, the youngest being 3 years old. There were no parents. I have no records of why their parents were not there and what happened to them. But he was 24, taking care of 7 younger siblings on a painter's salary. Now here's the interesting part too. He was living in a house on Rope Walk. Census records say Roper Walk, but people always mess up census records when they digitize them. Rope Walk is literally about 15 steps from this place. The house is no longer there. It's a corner place, but the GPS says no, that's where Rope Walk was. So in my family research, I looked in the 1901 Irish census, and great-grandma Jane Moore lived at 22 Rope Walk, and I think it's there. So this is Magdalen Street. This is the row house where Robert Moore lived. And you go about 15 paces and see this green patch where my husband is standing and the lovely young tree. There stood a house, or probably a row house for very poor people, where Jane Moore and her 7 siblings pretty much raised themselves. So they were a hop, skip, and a jump from each other. My imagination's running wild now. See, it's parking meter. That's where it was, because this is Rope Walk right here. And when I turned the GPS, it said it was on this plot right there. 1901. So there's part of our family history. So around the corner is Magdalen Tower. And I believe up this street is Patrick Street, where they eventually married and lived. So I'm walking down this little alleyway in Drogheda. And right around the corner from where Jane Moore and Robert Doyle lived when they were younger, They literally moved around the corner to this row house area. So they only moved a block away when they got married. And in the 1911 Irish census, that's where they were living with their 2-month-old firstborn Richard Doyle. So I'm walking down Patrick Street in Drogheda. Sorry for the wind. It's a gorgeous day, a little windy. But we're looking for 24. It's beautiful today. And there it is. There's where he lived. Jane Moore, Robert Doyle, 24 St. Patrick. So I found St. Peter's National School around the corner from their house, where my grandpa Doyle grew up, and it was built in the 1800s, so I think it's pretty safe to say that my grandpa Doyle probably went to school here at some point. This is St. Peter's Church, and it's in his neighborhood, and it's actually listed in the census records as their home parish, because of course they would list things like that, what your home parish was and what your neighborhood was. And it was open that day, so my husband and I went in, and it's an amazing church. It's so beautiful, so peaceful and quiet. And my husband's a great photographer and took some great pictures. And that's outside the church, the Blessed Virgin Mary. And that's Drogheda.